Someone else who takes a lot of unpopular views and a lot of hits is Chris Hedges.
Yeah, Chris is sort of the standard bearer for being willing to be unpopular and going against the grain. And so we're gonna talk to him. And just to preface this, one of the things I love about Chris is, like, a really good reporter, there has to be an element of just wanting to zag when everyone else is zigging. You know what I mean? Like, there has to be the not just the willingness, but the desire to go against the grain. And Chris kind of has always been that person. He's gone to places that nobody else wants to go. And so I think he embodies a lot of qualities that are really, really kind of going out of style in the business. And so we're going to talk to him about all that stuff. We're joined today by a very special guest, the celebrated war correspondent, one of my heroes in journalism, Chris Hedges, Pulitzer Prize winner. He's going to talk to us about a whole bunch of stuff today. But we think we should start off by what you were doing yesterday down on Wall Street. Tell us about the protest, Extinction Rebellion, the history of it, what happened.
So Extinction Rebellion is a British-based group. It's about a year old. And it, I think, has come to the very correct conclusion that the ruling elites are incapable of reform. And appealing to their better nature is a waste of time because they don't have one, and that as a species we're completely fucked, even if we stop all carbon emissions today, which isn't happening, and therefore our last best chance is to disrupt the machine, to carry out sustained acts of civil disobedience. Extinction Rebellion is a much more robust organization in Great Britain. So the goal is to really shut down the center of London, especially around Westminster, for 3 weeks. They shut down London, large parts of London, in April for 10 days with 1,000 arrests.
Wow.
And I think that's it. I think that that's the only hope. So I was with them and gave one of my diatribes.
Yeah, tell us about your diatribe. It sounded kind of like a classic Hedges.
It was, right. Yeah. Everything's a sermon. That's what happens. And
we should point out, we're going to get into this, but you were a minister. You went to divinity school.
I did. Yeah. And but I asked the question, who are these people behind me in this temple of greed? I probably lifted that from one of your books. And we know
trademark.
We know who they are. They were the slaveholders. They were the robber barons and the railroad magnates that stole indigenous land and killed indigenous people and slaughtered the buffalo herds. They are the industrialists who gunned down hundreds of American workers who were trying to organize at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. They are the people who unleashed the reign of terror against black people through black codes and lynching. That's who they are. And I went, and then I asked, who are we?
Right.
And where do we come from? We came from Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner and John Brown and Harriet Tubman and Malcolm and Martin and Eugene V. Debs, and we're often defeated. But I closed by saying, that I don't know if we're going to succeed, but these corporate forces have us by the throat, and they have my children by the throat. And in the end, I don't fight fascists because I'm going to win. I fight fascists because they're fascists.
Right. And you did this down on Wall Street, right? The symbolism.
Yes, it was perfect. It was a beautiful set. Hopefully somebody filmed it.
Is the girl in front of the bowl still there?
We were a little up. We were a little down from that, so it was right in front of the New York Stock Exchange. Yeah. A lot of people had a die-in, and they'd splattered blood with holding signs to commemorating those who had died in the climate disasters, flooding, wildfires, etc.
She's my favorite neoliberal feminist monument.
The girl
standing in front of the bull, which is funny because I don't know how she's going to defeat the bull. She's just standing in front of it.
Which like it's charge at it?
Yeah, I mean it's a great symbol in a way, right? Of like the co-opting of feminism and activism by capitalism. But it's supposed to be like a lean-in little girl.
Right.
She's going to lean in for the last time. Unfortunately, yeah. I just had Christian Parenti on, by the way, who wrote this great piece in Jacobin about environmentalism and Marxist environmentalism, and also how we can fight climate change without self-loathing, which is an interesting proposition.
How do you do it without self-loathing?
Well, he was saying that you reminded me of it when you mentioned the buffalo, but he was saying that, human beings and interact with the environment, and that per se isn't bad. It's the capitalist interaction with the environment. And so we don't have to make it man or humans against nature.
Well, it's the treating of the environment as an inert commodity that you exploit until exhaustion or collapse.
Yeah.
And his book, the name escapes me, which I read.
Tropic of Chaos?
Yeah, Tropic of Chaos is quite good.
Yeah.
It's a very good book.
Yeah.
Chris has read basically every book.
No, I hang out with Cornel West. So
oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's it always is very humbling because he has read every book.
Right.
And then chastises me for not.
For the things you didn't read.
Never read Schopenhauer? I call him.
Brother Chris? Does he call you Brother Chris?
Well, we're close. He just calls me Chris, yeah.
Schopenhauer.
Sometimes
do you find Schopenhauer funny? I find Schopenhauer very funny.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I haven't read Schopenhauer.
Really?
Yeah.
Or not much of it. Yeah. Should I go read it?
You should do a reading now.
It's so dark that it goes over into being funny, but maybe not everybody would think that.
Well, that's kind of like Kierkegaard.
Right.
Who I do
Yeah.
Who said it? Kierkegaard or Schopenhauer?
We could have a contest later. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. So how did you get into journalism? Let's go back to your background. Your father was a minister, right?
Yeah.
You talked about this. So it wasn't your intention to go into journalism, was it?
Well, it was my intention to be a writer.
Writer, yeah.
So I always wrote. I mean, for the age of 4, I knew what I wanted to be. But I had this, and I published my first piece when I was 12 in a historical journal. It was the history of my father's church, which was very old. And then I published my first piece in a major newspaper when I was in college, in the Christian Science Monitor.
Oh.
You want to hear that story?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, so
you were in Boston, right? At the time. Right?
No, I was in. So I went to college at Colgate, upstate New York, and I got a internship on the House Foreign Affairs Committee for the summer, on the Subcommittee on International Development, and so somehow, rather than answer letters, I got myself into a position where it was done during the Carter presidency. I was writing a case study of Gulf and Western and how they treated sweatshop workers in La Romana in the Dominican Republic, and they were killing them. They were shooting. The labor union leaders were being murdered, found dead in a ditch. And so I found this guy. His name was Sasha Volman. He'd been like a partisan leader in Romania during World War II, and then so he was one of these European socialists who hated communism, and he went to the Dominican Republic and became a huge CIA asset. So he, was fighting, quote unquote, the communists, but at the same time he hated the big corporations. And he was in a hospital in Georgetown having some pretty serious surgery, like his gallbladder removed or something. And I found him, and he had all the dirt on Gulf and Western, and he gave it to me. I mean, just dirty, dirty stuff.
Wow.
And so one day I'm in the congressman's office. This was Michael Harrington from North Shore, Boston, and 2 guys in suits come in from Gulf and Western, which was all mobbed up with Charlie Bluedorn. And next thing you know, I'm called into the administrative assistant's office, and I'm fired from my unpaid internship. And I go around and collect donations from all the rest of the interns, and hitchhiked to Miami to go to the Dominican Republic. Yeah, I'm going to tell you the whole uncensored version. And there was this very beautiful French-American woman named Jeannot, and somehow...
This is a movie.
I
convinced her to go with me.
Wow.
But I honestly blocked out what my argument was.
I like it.
A year later, I had lunch with her. She lives in Boston when I was on a fellowship at Harvard. I said, Jenna, why did you go with me? She goes, but you told me the congressman said I had to go. I don't remember saying that. I honestly don't.
Well, it's effective.
Anyway, off we went.
It was civic duty.
Yeah.
Hitchhiking through Georgia with a blonde ponytail, not a good idea. And we got to Florida. Then we flew to the Dominican Republic, and she was a Baha'i and went to a Baha'i retreat. And so I was going to go out and finish the work, the investigative work to write this piece about Gulf and Western and how they were breaking and murdering labor union leaders. And I had no money, I had no resources. I'm staying in a little dormitory for the sons of Haitian cane cutters, run by the Episcopal Church in Santo Domingo. I come out the first day. I run into an American woman who's the organist. She introduces herself as Tamaño. I said, oh, you mean like Francisco Camaño, the guy who was a colonel in 1965, The U.S. Marines invade.
Right.
He goes to Cuba. He raises a rebel force. He comes back. The Green Berets land and wipe him out. He said, yeah, it was my husband's brother.
Wow.
And so I tell her what I'm trying to do. And she said, well, my daughter, Liliana, I was like 19 or something, who was in her 30s, has just gotten divorced and was back.
Janae, better look out.
Well, no, she's off at a Baha'i retreat, so
Okay,
I'm on
got
my
it.
own.
Good timing.
And this, she was a firecracker, this woman. So they lend me the family car. We go out there, and we are going to all these sweatshops where the foreman had these. They were almost the size of baseball bats and would beat the workers.
Wow.
And they were what were they that they were?
Well, they were. It was textiles. It was La Romana was a big sweatshop area.
But what were they beating them with? That were
they were like big truncheons, but they were bigger than truncheons.
Got it. Sorry.
And at one point, they started beating on it. I decided to take a picture, and that was it. So the goons started, except that I ran track, and I was very good, and they couldn't catch me. And so then it starts to rain, because it's right on the coast. You know, these thunderstorms come in like freight trains. And so I think her name was Liliana. She's driving up and down on the dirt roads, and I'm trying to get to the car before the goons get me. And she's screaming, "Don't touch him, I'm a Camano." And finally I make a run for it. I get in the car, and we drive, I think it was about 3 hours, if I remember, back to San Domingo. About 2 hours we stop at this beer shack, and drink a lot of beer. And then come out, and it's the rain stopped, and it's feral, so the steam is coming up from the vegetation. And she pulls me up next to the car and says, "Did I ever tell you I have a tattoo?" I said, "No." She said, "You want to see it?" I said, "Sure." And she unzips her pants, and she has like a butterfly or something tattoo right there. And that's when I knew I wanted to be a foreign correspondent.
Nice.
And I published
wow,
it.
That's great.
Yeah, I published it in the Christian Science Monitor. But
Did you publish the photo as well and all that?
No. It was the Christian Science Monitor.
Oh, right.
Don't you know?
No, yeah.
Yeah, they never talk about sex or death.
Huh.
Yeah.
Everything in between, right?
Yeah.
But, my father was a social activist. He was involved in the anti-war movement. He was a World War II vet. He came back from the war pretty much a pacifist. He'd been in North Africa. He was very involved in the civil rights movement and the gay rights movement. And I couldn't reconcile the quote-unquote objectivity of American journalism. I cared about writing and loved writing. But I wasn't really objective about injustice, suffering, human misery. And so I did go to divinity school at Harvard. And then after 2 years, I kind of had, and I always say Harvard's where I learned to hate liberals.
We talked about this because you were on the T, right?
I lived in Roxbury.
Yeah.
So I was running a small church there in a very bad part of Boston, right across from Mission Extension Housing Project. And so commuting into Cambridge every day with classmates who talked about empowering people they'd never met.
Right.
Or they liked the poor, but they didn't like the smell of the poor. So, and they'd all go off.
Clara Jeffrey.
Yeah, they'd go to Nicaragua and pick coffee for a week with the Sandinistas and spend the rest of the semester talking about it.
But they wouldn't cross the Charles.
Yeah, they wouldn't take
Right.
the Green Line.
Yeah.
So I took a year off. I went and studied Spanish with the Maryknoll Fathers. I freelanced, ended up writing stuff for the Washington Post, ended up absolutely broke in Buenos Aires, was actually trying to get a job on a freighter so I could work my way back to New York City, and the Falkland War broke out, and I was in Buenos Aires, so I ended up doing NPR, the Yorkshire Post, the Baltimore Sun. I mean, I went from like living on $50 a month to making $600 a day. And like all people who have never had money, of course, I threw away my clothes and bought like the most gaudy.
Yeah, the worst clothes you can possibly find.
Yeah, the worst clothes you could possibly find. And it was Argentina, so you can imagine how bad those were. I had a...
You have photos?
No, thank God I don't. I had a reserved table at La Recoleta discotheque.
Wow.
I developed a very expensive cigar habit.
Could have been worse.
So by the end of 3 months, I made a fortune and it was all gone. And I didn't even really buy anything. But I don't regret it.
To get back to how your career started, I always, when young people ask me how do you get into journalism, I always
say don't.
Yeah, well, that's the first thing I say. Go to med school. Yeah, if you can't go to med school, just move overseas to someplace interesting,
Yeah, but that doesn't work anymore, Matt.
it doesn't work anymore. That's true.
Why,
But
'cause there's no money?
it did in
did
your
for
day.
me.
It did in my day,
Yeah,
right?
because, well, you were in Russia. Yeah. I mean, because there were outlets. I mean,
Right.
the Boston Globe had a foreign section. The Philadelphia Inquirer had a foreign section.
And everybody needed stringers.
Everybody needed stringers. So, I mean, I began as a stringer and then eventually was hired as a full-time employee. But that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, when I was in Salvador, every network had a bureau. They had reporters. They had producers. It's all gone.
Yeah.
Vanished.
Yeah.
Up in smoke.
That was a way into the business back then. Was just going to hotspots.
Sure,
there weren't a lot of journalists who wanted to go to these places.
That's right. Well, that's the great thing.
Yeah.
And that was great for my career at the Times because all the jobs that I wanted, nobody else wanted.
Right.
Like when I volunteered to go to Sarajevo, the executive editor, Joe Lelyveld, said, well, I guess the line starts and ends with you, which was great. So they don't want to go there. All want to go to Paris, or they want to hang out in Washington.
Well, that was natural at that time because it wasn't exactly the safest place to be
it
in
wasn't very
Sarajevo.
well. 45 reporters had been killed by the time I got there. Yeah.
Right. But it was a great. There was a lot of opportunity for reporters back then because there was still this appetite to get the on the ground thing, and it's kind of a hole in the system a little bit, right? Because the editors don't exactly know what's going on. They still actually need the person on the ground to tell them the who, what, and where, and why.
Right, and the great thing about it is it's called sat phones. Mm-hmm. Since you can't fire it up, they have to leave you alone. I mean, when I would go out in Bosnia with my sat phone, I didn't have electricity, so I had 4 hours, if I remember correctly, battery.
What's a sat phone?
A satellite phone. So I would set it up. My photographer he could send over the sat phone. I'd send. Then we have to turn it off.
Right.
They can't come for you.
Right.
It's great.
So go and do your work, come back, give us something, right? And you kind of existed for a long time at the Times in this kind of weird gray area where you were on the front page regularly.
Yeah,
and
well, they need
from the Middle
people
East.
like that. What they don't want is you in the newsroom.
Right.
That never works out really well.
Yeah. So we were talking before about the first Gulf War, and I think this is really interesting because this is kind of a metaphor for your whole career. Everybody else was doing this new form of reporting, this kind of embedded pool reporting, right?
Yeah, well, it was even worse than that. So, so the first Gulf War, the people running the military press operations all came out of Vietnam. And for them, the press was the fifth column.
Right.
What they didn't realize is that everybody was over there. This was a whole new generation, and they were all over there to lick the boots of the military.
Right.
Yeah, they just and lionize Schwarzkopf, who was a drunk, and et cetera, et cetera. And the army was so clueless they couldn't figure it out. So they thought the press was the enemy. In fact, the press just wanted to do their part, which is what the press always does in war, especially at the inception of wars. And Philip Knightley wrote quite a fine book on it called The First Casualty, which is truth. Obviously, first of all, I speak Arabic, so I was not about to do the pool. I figured I came here to be a reporter. If I can't be a reporter, they would throw me out. So I started going off. I actually got a Marine Corps uniform, so I could go through the checkpoints and sleep out in the desert with Bedouins. I speak Arabic. And I start filing these stories, and I kind of shatter the storyline that the reporters, including the New York Times reporters, were feeding their editors. We can't go anywhere. We can't. And they got really angry. And so all of the reporters, New York Times reporters, I think there were 5 of them, wrote a letter to the foreign editor and said that I was ruining our relationship with the military.
Because you weren't going by the pool strictures.
I wasn't doing the way the pool worked is they'd take just a few people out, and then they'd come back, and everybody would write up what they saw, and then everybody would sit in the hotel and write it. I mean, it was ridiculous.
That's what happens in campaigns too. It's
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I never. You do campaigns. I don't know why. I don't want to go any near them.
But it's the same system.
It's like the White House. You don't have to, people don't have to. Who knows what Trump does? But before, you never had to. Reporters in the White House didn't take notes because in real time they just would hand them what the only advantage I could see from a distance of being a White House reporter is that you get to introduce your mother to the president. Otherwise, it's just a stenography. I mean, it's just the most, and not only that, but it's humiliating stenography. Yeah.
Unless you're Helen Thomas, I guess, right?
Huh?
Unless you're Helen Thomas.
Well, but look what they did to her.
I know,
Come
right.
on.
she was one of the exceptions.
But I mean, basically, they were reacting to Vietnam because during Vietnam,
not in the beginning of Vietnam. What people don't remember is that everybody went in to do their part,
right?
And then, what people don't understand about the press is that you're an exception, but it is largely a reactive force. It reacts. It's not a pioneering. It's not like the press told the truth about Vietnam. What happened was the body bags started coming home, and public perceptions of the war changed. And then Walter Cronkite goes on the air, of course, after public perceptions have changed, to criticize the war. And so the latter part of the war, the press was freed to write honestly about the war, or at least not completely honest, but more honest.
Yeah, they were at least allowed to have the take. We might not win this, right?
Well, they also covered atrocities.
Yeah,
I mean,
some of them.
So,
Agent Orange. I mean, they got around to that, right?
Yeah. I mean, now Nick Turst did a good book, Kill Anything That Moves, which goes back and looks at the Army records, the reports. So, I mean, Vietnam was just one huge atrocity. I mean, they didn't begin to come close to explaining the reality, but at least they hinted at it. That they weren't doing at the beginning. So the Army, these people who would have been young lieutenants or something, bought this line, the stabbed in the back theory, that we would have won the war, but for, And so that was the funny part, is that they were making war on a press. I mean, the whole pool system was administered by my colleagues, and it couldn't have functioned without them. And they administered it because, despite what they told their editors, they wanted it. And having spent 20 years in war zones, I can tell you only about 10 or 15% of reporters really want to go out. Right. The rest don't. They're handout. They get handouts. That's the honest people in war are photographers, and they also have the highest casualty rate because they have to get out.
Right.
But the reporters, they're...
So, but you think that that system, and I'm sorry to dwell on this, but I just find it so interesting. Part of it seems to me, I was embedded in the Iraq War, and it felt like part of the strategy there was to make you feel dependent upon the people who you were embedded with.
It's like a Boy Scout. It's like you're weak with Boy Scouts.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And of course, most of these reporters have never been anywhere near a war and are like shitting their pants, and they want to be part of the team. Yeah, it's really it really unfortunately feeds every stereotype of wimpy journalists. Now, by the time I got to the Gulf, I'd already been in more combat than anybody unless they'd been in Vietnam. Those people were all colonels and up. And I spoke the language, and so I didn't need it, and I didn't want it. But once you depend on them for logistics, once you depend on them for security, food, literally every aspect, what are you going to write?
Right.
I mean, are you,
totally.
If you're, I know reporters who were embedded in units after they took Baghdad, and a lot of these cars, they were nervous. So, if a car would come too quickly at a checkpoint, they'd quote unquote light it up, which meant, and it usually meant they just killed a family of 6 or something.
Right.
These reporters never wrote that. I'm not going to name them, but I know who they are. They told me because they'd instantly be unembedded.
Right.
And that's the first problem. The second problem is that you only see the war from the perspective, their perspective. So they're off, firing 90 millimeter tank rounds at a village. You don't see the result.
Right.
And I'm not actually against embedding. I think it is an aspect of war reporting. But when that's the only war reporting, then you don't have a clue as to what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you think it should be like you should alternate sides, or
No, I
have
don't want to do
different?
it. I don't embed.
No, but what do you think the
No, I
good
think
way
you got to
do
have
it
people.
is?
Well, so when I went out on my own, Dick Cheney was the defense secretary, and they invented this term for people like me called the unilaterals, a new term for being a reporter. And before the invasion of Kuwait, Cheney sent out a list of I think it wasn't a long list, 10 or 15 of us that he wanted expelled from Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
Before the invasion. Now I was right up at the top.
That's a badge of honor.
Yeah, but the funny part is they couldn't find me. They had 500,000 troops, and they never found me.
But when you say that you don't think embedding is bad, so how is it that
I think it's an aspect of the war, but almost a tangential one. So you're always going to have reporters that want to embed. That's fine, but you can't cover a war when your entire all of the reporting on that war is done
Right.
by embedded reporters. You don't really know what's going on.
So ideally, you would have, let's say, imagining that newspapers still kind of.
Well, you'd
existed
have
with
reporters
budgets,
who
but
are
you'd
out
have-
on their own. It's more dangerous. I mean, it's obviously
Right.
more dangerous.
So would one paper have, ideally, one paper would have someone embedded, someone on their
Yeah.
own, someone embedded with the actual native population or indigenous there? Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So you went on. You were based in Cairo for a while after that,
Yeah,
right?
4 years.
4 years.
How did you learn Arabic?
So I was with the Dallas Morning News in Central America, and I decided I wanted to spend the rest of my life in Latin America. It's a wonderful culture. I speak Spanish. But I couldn't get them to open a bureau in South America, so they offered me London or Jerusalem. I didn't want to go to London, cover the
Big
royal
Ben.
family or something. So I said I would go to Jerusalem if I could take a sabbatical and study Arabic.
Oh, that's cool.
And I convinced the editors of the Dallas Morning News that the best place to study Arabic was that great center of Arabic learning, Switzerland.
Oh.
So I went to Lausanne and studied Arabic. My first wife was Swiss, and then I later took courses at Hebrew University. Yeah.
And plus, it enriches your Spanish because of all the AL words
Yeah.
that have Arabic roots.
Yeah. There you go.
And lastly, I guess we should ask about the impeachment drama. You had a fascinating go back and forth on Democracy Now! Last week. I think we actually may disagree on this one a little bit, but what's your take on this? Because I think it's a complicated story. Obviously, to me, it's like it's basically a story about dueling elite narratives.
Of course
right?
it is.
Yeah.
Because, well, neither party has defended the rule of law. Mm-hmm. From the first week Trump was in office, you could have impeached him on the Emoluments Clause alone, inciting racism, using tax laws to go after his political enemies, Bezos, who's a shit at Amazon, obstructing justice. Mm-hmm. I mean, obstruction, which the Mueller report, was a kind of Trojan horse, but he did try to obstruct justice.
Yeah, I think you could.
Yeah,
you could make the argument.
But none of that mattered until you touched the anointed candidate of the Democratic Party donor class, which was Biden.
Right.
So in that sense, it's like Watergate.
Right.
So all of the crimes of the Nixon White House are being carried out against the anti-war movement, the peace movement, and Ellsberg's
Cambodians.
Cambodia, but as soon as you touch the Democratic establishment, then.
Right.
And that's what's happened. They may get him. Mm-hmm. They may get him, but as I wrote a piece called "The Problem with Impeachment," it's probably going to make things worse,
right?
Because the fundamental structures of our society, which have destroyed our democracy, the system of legalized bribery and corporate money, the collapse of the courts in the service of corporate power, wholly owned subsidiaries, the degradation and disintegration of the media as an effective force within a democracy, the wholesale security and surveillance state, the concentration of wealth and staggering social, none of that is going to change.
Right.
And that's where our problems come from. And so if you go after Trump and you don't address the underlying decay that gave us Trump, then you are going to exacerbate the antagonisms within the warring tribes. And look, we are headed towards, I think, political violence. And, Cesar Sayoc, if those pipe bombs had gone off, you would have decapitated the entire Democratic Party leadership. So, and the country's awash, 300 million weapons, 1.5 million, assault-style weapons, these AR-15s. Yeah, I mean, we have an average of a mass shooting every day. So and I think that the liberal class and the Democrats see this as the solution. They've personified all of their problems into Trump, and that's not only very short-sighted but very dangerous.
Right. And why do you think they didn't go after him with the Emoluments Clause?
We know why. I mean, because Pelosi didn't think it was politically expedient.
But why? Yeah, I guess the question is, why was that not politically expedient?
Well, because you have blue dog Democrats. You have all sorts of Democrats who are essentially, by thin margins taking seats in Trump territory. And if the Democratic Party is seen as essentially trying to carry out a vendetta against Trump. I think this is the reasoning of Pelosi and the Democratic Party leadership. This would hurt their their ability to maintain control of the House and perhaps take control of the Senate. So we know what her decision was, but that's as bad as the Republicans. Neither party is defending the rule of law.
Right.
They only defend the rule of law when it's convenient.
And then, I guess this will give people the illusion of political protest a little bit. It's going to be this enormous drama. All their political energy is going to go into this thing that's not really about. You know?
But even best case scenario for them, what happens, right? Like, do they think that the impeachment vote is going to go through?
Well, there are legends now. A lot of the op-ed pieces are basically saying, you never know, it's getting more popular, so we might actually get to the 2/3.
Yeah. And even if that happens, then what happens? Then Pence, if he's...
Well, as Noam Chomsky points out, Pence will be worse. Because, Donald Trump has no ideology, really.
And he's
Pence
galvanized so much
Pence
opposition.
Pence is a Christian fascist.
Right. But he's not rude. He's polite.
He's a lot more dangerous than that.
No, I know. So I don't even know what the end game is.
They don't know what the end game is either.
Just
That's the problem. Right. They don't know what the end game is either.
Ratings. Chris, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it.
Great.
And a great free-ranging discussion. And good luck.
Wow. What a legend. That was great. I didn't know what Gulf and Western was.
Gulf and Western?
Yeah.
What is Gulf and Western?
Oh, you didn't either. It's like a manufacturer. He was talking about being the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought this was an age thing. I mean, we're basically the same age, you and I.
No. Well, I wish we were. Yeah.
You're like, I wish you were older, Katie, because you're pretty immature. Yeah.
So we have some housekeeping.
Yeah, we're doing something very exciting. You guys may know that I'm very famous for my drinking games on
debate
Twitter.
night drinking games.
No, Matt, you have one of the things that you're most well known for, I think, is besides your amazing books and reporting, is that you have these drinking games that you used to write up and now both write up in advance but also live tweet, right?
Right, yeah.
So tell us about that. Where did that come from, by the way?
I actually don't remember.
Didn't it start with just Republicans? Debates or no?
I think it might have started with the last debate cycle in 2015, 16.
Okay.
And so we started doing that. And so we're going to do it again next week. We're actually going to drink, and you can watch. I think it's going to be on live. Right?
Yeah, so, on YouTube. We'll put out a link.
We'll put out. You follow us on Twitter.
I'm Katie Halps, which is letter K, letter T, Halps, and you are
at Taibbi.
Right. Yeah, that'll be really exciting.
So you can join us next week when we drink ourselves to death on camera
on Tuesday night, the 15th of October.
Yeah. So that was Useful Idiots. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye. Don't forget to rate and review.
Right. Because we hate Pods of America.
Yes.
Screw those people.
We must crush them.